Okay, let's talk about another cool feature of Pivot, which is grouping. So what Pivot usually do is whenever we drag and drop a text field, it automatically groups all the unique fields inside that column. So and under ship mode, I have first class, but if I want to see how many first class I have, how many records have first class, so in total, just let me format it quickly. Okay. So in total there are 7,505 first class records, same day 2701. So what Pivot does is whenever we drag and drop a field into under rows or a column for that matter, it groups and it gives you the unique value. So we can further do a grouping, not for the text, but something which is numbers. For example, quantity. So if we'll drag and drop quantity under values, it will automatically summarize it and it will give me the default. Either I can do sum, count, average. I can perform all these mathematical operations. But what if instead of dropping under values, if I drop it under rows? So Pivot has given me all the unique orders, order quantity. So right from 1 till 14 I have these many orders. So in a given record my order quantity is varying from 1 to 14. I can with numbers I can further group it. So let's just say for our analysis purpose we need to analyze sales value. Let's say by 4. I want to see how many amounts sold between 1 to 4 orders, how many sales between 4 to 6, 4 to 8, 8 to 40, 8 to 12, and 12 to 16. Or we can do it a group of 5, 1 to 5 orders. What is the total orders amount sold between 1 to 5, 5 to 10, and 10 to 15. So the process is simple for that. We just drag and drop that number field into under rows, then right click and click group. Here we automatically it picks up the minimum and the maximum thresholds. I can modify it, so I can say it should end at 15, and I want to create a group of 5 and I click OK. So now Excel has grouped my orders from 1 to 5, 6 to 10, and 11 to 15. And when I drag and drop that, I want to see how many actually records are available. So let me do the value field settings, records count, and it should be formatted as number. So there are 42,664 records between order 1 to 5, and then 6 to 10 there are 8,000 records, and 11 to 15 601 records. And now I can actually see what's the sales amount and what's a percentage of how much. Right. So now I wish to see what is the percentage of how many items, or what's the revenue contribution between 1 to 5, 6 to 10, and 11 to 15 order quantity. So I'll take help of our value field settings, percentage of column total and percentage revenue. So we sold approx 65% of our entire product. The revenue came from order quantity 1 to 5, and whereas we are selling 11 to 15 bulk orders, let's say we call it bulk orders 11 to 15, so it's contributing to about 3.64% to the overall revenue. So that's how we can use our groups. We can group our numerical values, and once you group any numerical value, you can actually use it as a slicer. So now when I use order call quantity into slicer, I'll get those groups as well. And let me add few more slicers. Let's say call it chip mode. So 1 to 5, 11 to 15, 6 to 10. So I have that as a slicer, and if I remove this group from here and I put something else, let's put market. So I can filter my results accordingly, and it will help me to analyze my performance quickly. And I can use it in a field as usual. So now I can drag and drop quantity under market. Let's remove this slicer. So now this group which we just created will work just like any regular text field. However, if I drag and drop quantity into values, I can still use it as a regular number field. So let's now talk about, that's about group, how to create groups when it comes to when you're grouping a number. We'll talk about groups, how to group, the grouping works on the date field. So in a while. Well, but before that, let's talk about slicers. So as you have seen that slicers helps creating interactivity, and it helps to add makes my report look better. So but there are some so we can do a lot of settings, slicer settings with this. So we'll start with, let me create another pivot right now here, and this time I'll remove market and quantity, and we make it, let's say, region. So at this moment my slicer is interacting with both pivot tables. As you can see, the values are changing in both the tables. So I can actually control this, plus I can do some formatting options on the slicers to make it look better. So let me create some space at the top. Now I wish to so few things. One is I wish to make it, instead of in a single column, I want to put it in one row. So furniture, office supplies and technology should be in one row. So I'll select the slicer and go to slicer options, and here under columns I increase the column number. So instead of in one column, I put it in 3 columns. So I have my slicers like this. I put category at the top. Similarly, I can make it 2 columns. Resize it. And let me cut paste my pivot next to this and put quantity. And now in the quantity field, I can see these fields or slicer values where it has no values. So I can hide this. So what I can do is I can go to, again, select the slicer, go to slicer settings, and I click hide items with no data. So now only only those items are visible which has values in it. So now as you can see, I have created an interactive dashboard like report where I'm interacting with multiple pivots at the moment. So I can control that my slicer should interact with which pivot table. So for example, I don't want this slicer to interact with this pivot. So how can we control it is that through report connection. So first we have to select the slicer, and then we go to slicer option, and then go to report connection. So let's go and check. So my slicer is connected with, at this moment I have 3 pivot tables in this current workbook. The region sales in pivot table 1 sheet, pivot tables 3 in the pivot table 2 sheet, and region sales 2 in the pivot table 2 sheet again. And at this moment this slicer is connected with pivot table 3 and region sales 2, and it's denoted by the check mark. So how can we define the pivot table name? It's simple. You select the pivot table. First we need to select the pivot table anywhere inside the pivot table, and we go to pivot table analyze. Under pivot table analyze, we there is an option called pivot table name. So we can double click it and make changes here. So we can assign a name which follows the same convention as you do it for naming a range. So which means that it cannot start with a number. Your name cannot start with a number. There cannot be any space in it, and it has to be unique. So since there is already a pivot table name called region sales, so I cannot have it a region sales again, so I have to name it different. So let's just say change it to by market sales. Let's keep it market sales, and this is region sales 2. So let's go back to our slicer settings. Slicer report connection. So at this moment this slicer quantity is interacting with market sales 2 and region sales 2. What I wish is it should not change when I'm making changes into the when I'm making selection under quantity slicer. It should not change the market sales. So I'll just simply uncheck it and I click OK. Now when I'm clicking on this slicer, it is interacting with this but not with this. However, these two slicers are interacting with both the pivot tables.